Before this episode kicks in, I want to take a second to thank a very special listener. We have our first review for this podcast after 5,000 downloads and 29 episodes. We finally have one. And as I said in previous episodes, this person will be entered into a contest to win National Land Realty swag. So stay tuned for other reviews as they come in on Apple Podcasts. Apple Podcasts is really the only place to leave written reviews like this, so just keep that in mind. So let's read this out loud. Gold, Solid Gold is the title. This podcast never ceases to amaze me with the amount of insight that is given in every single episode. All of the questions are extremely insightful, and I have yet to have a question left unanswered when listening to Mac and the guests he has on the show. Let's not thank me for any of that. It's all the guests. They're very knowledgeable, and it's great. If you want to learn more about land or how to be the best land professional in your market, you need to listen to this show. If you're a land owner and want to learn more about how to utilize or improve your land, you need to listen to this show. It is gold in your pocket. Ladies and gentlemen, we didn't even pay for this review. This came in just after we announced our contest. So, Chris, thank you. And stay tuned for other reviews as they come in. Now let's get on with this show. Welcome to episode number 29 of the National Land Realty Podcast, where we discuss all things land. Our goal here is to inform, educate, and entertain those of you who own land or are interested in the buying and selling of land throughout the United States. My name is Mac Christian, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at National Land Realty. I'll be your host for this episode. In this episode, I'm talking with the president of National Land Realty, Jason Burbage. Most of our shows focus on land improvements, the things that we do to change the land to suit our needs. This discussion takes a different approach. Land has a profound impact on us. It can strengthen us, guide us, and it can shape us. Jason Burbage has been profoundly influenced by his relationship with the land. Born with a complication that affected his hands, he has turned what could have been a defeat into a strength. Much of this is due to his own perseverance and his upbringing, but as you will hear, the land around him has helped guide his journey. This is his story. Enjoy. I am sitting here with Jason Burbage, president of National Land Realty, and this is sort of a unique conversation on. We arrived here, right? Because we're always trying to get guests on the show, and as I'm kind of going through this, I hadn't had you on the show in a while, and it's just something like I want to get you on here as much as possible, mostly just because of your experience with land sales, your knowledge of the industry. You're featured on RFD TV all the time, and you're working with our agents all the time. You advise people on sales practice and best practice for interacting with clients and everything. And so I was thinking in that range, but we started talking, and because I obviously sound really organized with this, and we started talking about what should we talk about? And you had written a blog on the National Land Realty blog about dealing with the hand that you're dealt. And we started talking about that blog a little bit, and the conversation kept on coming back to land and sort of how the land shaped who you are. And that is sort of the conversation at hand. I think where we've arrived is talking about how your life has been shaped by the land around you. And it's just a cool experience. And so you were born with unique circumstances. And so rather than me tell your story, how about you tell me about it a little bit?
Yeah. So this is interesting how we came to this. It's awkward for me sometimes to talk about myself. And the reason why it's awkward is because for the early years of my life, I didn't want to go anywhere where I'd have to explain to somebody, why I didn't have any fingers.
Right. And that's the story, right? You were
that's
born
the story
without any fingers, like just not removed, nothing like that. That's just, it came out that way. And
exactly. I was born without fingers on either hand. My hands did not develop. And I'm the oldest. I've got a younger brother who's 2 years younger than me, and I'm 46 years old. I was born in 1976. And so when I was born, it was kind of a shock because there was no like preliminary warning that something was wrong. And so I was born without fingers. That I never got a definite medical like reason why. The theory is that the umbilical cord restricted growth, which is probably what happened. So yeah, that's it. I mean, I'm a normal guy just like anybody else, except I don't have 5 fingers on each hand.
Which presents unique challenges just from, just interacting with people, right? Like it's not something you can hide. You can't it's pretty obvious that it's there. And so, you have to find new ways to overcome things. And, it's a very unique story just in general.
Yeah. So it's, unique is a great way to put it. I think that first of all, I'll say this, that I consider it to be a blessing. I first came to that point when I got older and more mature and started understanding what life is really about and what people really have to deal with, real world examples, especially amputees and folks that go through situations where they have all their limbs and then they experience something, whether it's war or some kind of accident that causes them to lose them. And I have so much respect for folks who have to go through that experience and come out better on the other hand. And there is a laundry list of people there's thousands of people who live life every day as an amputee. And technically I'm an amputee, except my amputations never happened. My amputations happened before I came out of the womb, basically. Right. So it's a blessing in that standpoint because I had to learn how to do things because there was no other way to do it. I mean, it's a blessing because I was forced to immediately start figuring out how to do things from birth. And I'm also very blessed because I was born to parents, my mother and my father, who, took a unexpected circumstance and turned it into an opportunity, basically because they fortunately decided that, they were going to take a proactive approach with this and not this sucks and, we're going to have to take care of this kid for the rest of our lives and, that sort of thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's just like anybody when you deal with something that's a major life altering experience like this, that you don't have your moments of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? This is not what I had in mind when I was thinking about my first child being born and all that kind of stuff. But they basically set the foundation for me from this mindset of, all right, this is the circumstance that you've got. Where's the opportunity that's going to be in it? And so that's the beginning of the story, basically. And because of that, and it's the best decision that anybody's ever made for me on my behalf, was my parents deciding they were going to be, they were going to look at this from a glass half full mindset, as from an opportunistic mindset, and really pour into me instead of just deciding they were just going to do everything for me. They set the foundation for me figuring out how to do things. And if I came to them and said, "Hey, I want to try this," it was never a no, you can't, you don't have hands. It was, okay, let's figure it out. And I guarantee you, because I'm a parent of 3 boys right now, that I guarantee you I'm sure I came to them with some harebrained idea. And, my mom or my dad would go think to themselves, God, this is going to be a waste of time. I don't have time to do this right now. But even if they were thinking it, they did it anyway. And it set up a great example for me in my role as a father now, when, one of my sons comes to me and says, "Hey, can we go do this?" And I'm thinking, you are not old enough to be, going off with a sharp knife and going and doing something along those lines or whatever, whatever it may be. But yeah, that's where it started, and it set the foundation for where I am today.
Yeah, and so from the sounds of it, and from the conversations that we've had, I mean, it really plays into everything I know of you, right? Like, because you're always talking about the lesson of, do you let the situation dictate you, or do you look for the opportunities in the situation? And it's kind of a foundation of everything that you talk about as just a person. And so you can kind of see where that's set up. But then what you were talking about too before was your parents bought a place by a creek, and you had 15 acres, and you sort of learned how to conquer the world on your own out there, going out into it and just figuring things out. And then your parents sort of enabling this process of like, the world's not going to change for you. How do you go out and figure things out to where you can master the world around you, sort of thing?
Yeah, it's so funny because we were talking about this. I've thought about my life a lot, obviously, but I'd never really put it into a framework of how much the woods and the land and the water molded me. I mean, it's a big part of me. It's the reason why I'm in this business, but specifically tied to my involvement with all that. So again, as you mentioned, my parents owned some land and they built a modest house on it. And, I think it's important to understand too that I grew up in rural South Carolina on the coast, about an hour south of Charleston, and in a very blue collar, lower middle class type of environment. And my father was a newspaper reporter at the time, and before he kind of really made his way in that business. So we didn't have a lot of money, but they had a dream. My parents had a dream to own some land in the country and own some land on some water. And they were able to figure out a way to make that happen and build a nice little house. And it was just an awesome environment to grow up in with my brother. And so, growing up in that lifestyle, we didn't have any extravagant resources or anything like that. We didn't have, there's no cable back then. So if you wanted multiple channels, you had to have a giant satellite dish. Well, we didn't have that. We had a tiny little black and white TV. And so that wasn't a part of the landscape, no video games or anything like that. It was like, if you're bored, go outside. And fortunately, I didn't have to worry about going outside and getting kidnapped or run over by a car or anything like that. I went outside, I went to the woods, or I went to the creek. And, a lot of times my brother and I were out there together doing stuff, or I was with my dad or with my mom. And being in that environment introduced me to situations that I would normally experience if I was growing up and never had access to the outdoors. So, so that shaped me, if I was off by myself and I wanted to climb a tree or I wanted to build a fort or whatever it may be, I figured out a way to do it, even though I didn't have any hands. And so, yeah, it's just amazing how being out in God's creation like that, experiencing just the life altering, just power of being in nature like that can do, especially for a kid that, coming from my background and with my circumstance. It's amazing how God used the outdoors to help me develop and give me confidence, and realize that I could be my own person, that I could go and do things on my own and all that kind of stuff. Just simply by being able to go outside and, have a little acreage around some trees and, wildlife and all that kind of stuff.
I was going to say there's something really life altering about the first time that you go outside and I might call it getting a boo-boo, but like the first time you get a boo-boo and your mom can't hear you.
Yeah.
You got to figure it out for yourself. Like, oh, how do I get myself out of this? No one knows where I am. And you have to, you come up with that mental fortitude of like, okay, get up. Is it bleeding? Like there's this whole it's that sort of where you have parents as sort of a crutch as far as safety net and stuff, and pushing yourself outside of that safety net inspires growth. Like we say it all the time internally, that growth comes from being uncomfortable. And so it's sort of getting outside like that and doing that. I wanted to ask you, is your brother younger or older than you?
He is younger than me. He's 2 years younger than me.
Gotcha. So he's the annoying one in the relationship that you had to tolerate. I was going to figure out
back then. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. These days, he's a minister these days. So the tables are flipped. I go to him for advice all the time now. Whereas back then it was like, get out of my way.
Yeah. Lean on him.
Yeah.
That's a good, and I think that's needed. I think that's needed with any kind of, brothers and sisters like that, where you can you learn that you can lean on the younger one. So you mentioned also that sort of as your life evolved, you kind of picked up more land as you went along, right? Like the what you were exposed to sort of expanded. And by your teenage years, you were running around on a 7,000 acre plantation setup, right?
Yeah, just a little bit, and I didn't even tell you this when we were talking before. So a little bit more background is that my grandfather on my mom's side, grew up in the same little community that I grew up in, a little community called Sheldon, South Carolina, and he farmed. The coastal farming in South Carolina, you're talking more produce and stuff like that than what you would expect in the Midwest. But they farmed and they had cattle and all kinds of stuff from that perspective. So, this kind of environment is what my mom grew up with, and what, my dad grew up in town, and he wanted to create that kind of lifestyle as well. So, learning how to fish and learning how to, learning gun safety and the importance of what hunting really is. It's not just going and killing things. It's much more than that, right? Was something that was, part of my lifestyle from the get go. Horses, the first major injury I ever had was I fell off my horse when I was 3 or 4 and broke my collarbone. So that was the first literally brush yourself up and get back on the horse, sort of experience that I had. And then, so
you were riding at 4?
Yeah. I mean, horses are a big part of my family. And so, yeah, I mean, it was a pony. But as soon as I could sit up there, my mom had me up there and I was riding, and, it was, I don't actively ride anymore from a competitive standpoint, but it was something that became a big part of my life actually, as well. And of course, having the land to be able to ride a horse around on was a key component of it. But yeah, so, eventually as I got older, my parents ended up splitting up, and mom ended up remarrying. And my stepfather, they're still married today. My stepfather managed a 7,000 acre property in the same general area where Sheldon was. And so I got introduced to all that from, my stepfather being the caretaker of the place, and, had the ability to be able to go off and explore even more beyond what I had on Huspa Creek, which is where our old house was. So I had I had that little world on Huspa Creek, which really was, we had the woods and the fields and that kind of stuff and the horses, but the creek was a huge part of all that. And then shifting over to the plantation, that grew the whole hunting, the bigger picture of the hunting side of things, from waterfowl and, deer and turkeys and just getting off. I mean, that was an amazing experience to be able to get off and get out, and there'd be literally nobody around, and getting stuck on my 4-wheeler and having to figure out how to get home. So I'm, 14 years old and it's dark and I've got to walk home. And, it was just an amazing part of my life to be able to, figure out fortitude from that type perspective.
Well, and you talked in the beginning of this conversation about how you would bring things to your parents and how you would get an idea to go do something, but it sort of sounds a little bit like they also drove you. I mean, because I'm thinking about putting a kid on a horse at 4, and I can think too. Like I have pictures of me on a horse at elk camp. I think I was 3 months old. I mean, there's just some parents that do things different, right? Like it sounds like your parents took the perspective of. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like they didn't give you a chance to think about limitations. They kind of put you into life in kind of like, we ride horses, and whether you have, fingers or not, we ride horses. So figure it out. And like,
man, that is just an awesome way to explain it. And nobody's ever said it that way, but that's the honest to God truth. I mean, when I say I was riding a horse at 3, I'm talking about riding by myself. Like, so just like you, I was on a horse's back as an infant. So yeah, it's like we ride horses, so you need to figure out how to ride a horse. We love the outdoors, so you need to figure out how to be able to survive in the outdoors. We love to fish, we love to hunt, we love to do all this kind of stuff, and we want you to be able to participate in that. So our attitude is we're going to figure out a way for you to be able to do it. And I mean, the first fishing rod I had, my dad bought me one of those little push button, bass buster type setups, and had a friend customize the knob on the reel. It basically fashioned a little bracket that I could put my right hand in so that it wouldn't slip off. I mean, it's little things like that that may seem so insignificant when you do it, but it's like, I'll never forget that. And it set the seed of, there's always a way to figure something out. And so, that little things like that to learning how to shoot, the first shotgun I ever got was a pump. And people are probably thinking, well, why in the world did they give him a pump? How does he pump the pump? How's he shuck it? And, manufactured a little hook, for lack of better words, that went on the forearm so that I could pump it. And the reason why I had a pump is because the pump is the safest type of gun for outside of a single shot for somebody to learn on.
I was going to say, if you think that's difficult, picture operating a single shot or a break action would have been even nastier to figure out. It actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So it's just figuring out ways, and I just, again, the whole negative of my parents splitting up. I mean, divorce is terrible, and you've got to understand that for me, that was a major. I talked about foundation role. That was my foundation, and then that. Life brought changes, which life does. And unfortunately, it ended up with my parents splitting up. But, in another way, I was introduced to a whole other environment, and with my stepfather coming into the picture. And I could go on down the road because my dad eventually remarried, and I learned, real estate from my stepmother. Right. I wouldn't have learned everything that I learned about selling houses and that kind of stuff if she hadn't been in the picture. And so again, you can tie things back to this is such a negative and so awful and everything else, or you can choose to find the opportunity. What's the opportunity that's in it? And I just continue to, that's just been a big part of, me being who I am. And it's incredibly helpful in this day and age because I don't consider myself to have limitations beyond, anybody else for that matter. I've pretty much, accomplished all the physical limitation side of things. And so now it's just like, I'm no different than anybody else. I'm just trying to, get by day and, learn how to live life and navigate through all the stuff that life brings along. And, somebody told me one time who was dealing with some of the struggles that he had. We were talking through things, and he said, "Yeah, you got it easy." I'm like, "Well, how do I have it easy?" He's like, "You had your whole life to deal with all this stuff that you had to deal with, so it's prepared you to deal with, things when they happen." I'm like, I've never really looked at it from that perspective before. I disagreed with him, of course, but I mean, I can understand why he had that perspective.
That's a unique way to look at it. As in, well, you dealt with this your whole life. It's easy for you. Like, it's one of the, like, I'm sure the first reaction is like, you think this is easy?
Yeah. And of course he didn't mean, he didn't.
No.
It was the mindset. I mean, what he was talking about was my mindset. And, but again, that's something that I work at every day. I mean, it is a daily thing for me. And I am fortunate. I believe that I was born. First of all, I believe that we're all born with specific purposes. I mean, God gives us a reason for being alive. And I believe he made me the way that he made me for a specific reason. So, and that's to be able to help people, help people get through hard times. And it's a benefit for me because I enjoy doing that. But it's also helpful when, I'm dealing with the stuff that we all deal with. We all deal with stuff. I mean, it's life in general. And so it's a blessing. When I refer to being born this way as a blessing, I'm blessed because I've got maybe a different perspective about looking at things that I think I can't do air quotes, but just pretend I'm doing air quotes. The normal people do. All you normal people got the short end of the stick when it came to all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it sounds, just from the sounds of what you were raised with, right? There's a unique perspective that comes with that. Because like, you go to school, you do the things at school, and you learn how to do the school things, and you're around people, and there's like the normal complications of just interactions with people. And then, so you go through all the normal kid stuff, and then you get to come home to a family where then you can kind of step outside into this free space, and you get to dictate the rules, and you get to decide what you're going to conquer. And not only did you have that, but you had the opportunity to do that with a family that enabled it, right? Like, there's this whole setup there to where, like, it's so easy for people to feel like a victim in difficult circumstance. And when you get an opportunity there to go into something and learn how to not be that, right? To create your own rules and to go into the world like this, it sounds like you had a very fortunate circumstance there, right? Because it could have gone the other way, right? You might not have had that freedom.
Yeah, and I think that was a really, really great way of explaining it. I mean, it's funny. You've said two things now that I've never thought about from that perspective. And so, when I was young, I had a victim mindset. I didn't like who I was. I didn't want to go out in public. I didn't want to go places. Like, I didn't want to get, if I was invited to a birthday party, it was a big deal for me to know who was going to be there. And if there were going to be a lot of kids who I didn't know, I didn't want to go because I didn't want to have to explain myself.
Just going to say that you have to explain it.
I didn't want to. It got so old answering the question, "What happened to your hands?" It was just every day, constant, or people staring at you. Not just kids, adults too. It's nuts how adults act. In ways too, but so I was very much in a place. Don't get me wrong. I don't think I was ever depressed or anything like that, but I very much prayed every day for God to make me normal. So that was a part of my life, but I think the reason why I didn't get into any kind of depression is, number one, because of what you mentioned about the family structure that I had and that foundation. And then the ability to be able to go, if I came home and I had a rough day, to be able to go outside. And, I was fortunate enough to have a few acres to be able to go mess around on, or a creek to play in. But, I was thinking about this, the other day. I was like, any family that introduces the outdoors to their kids is introducing an opportunity to be able to not only experience what makes this world so special and what makes the United States special and everything else, but it provides an outlet for kids to be able to deal with the stuff that kids have to deal with. It's escape is not the right word, because you're not escaping. You're putting yourself in an environment that's different, and it can be so healthy and beneficial for you. So I think that's why I became so passionate about the outdoors, and I've been active in conservation, not as an environmentalist, but as a conservationist. Not that there's anything wrong with environmentalism by any means either.
There is a difference. Yeah.
There is a difference, because I believe in the power of the great outdoors. And for us to live in a country where we've got, where you are in Idaho, for instance, your ability to be able to go and experience the outdoors, even not having to own the land, but just simply being able to go out and experience it, is awesome. For those families who take their kids on camping trips and go to the national parks and do all that kind of stuff, that is phenomenal, because you're introducing children to the power of what the great outdoors can accomplish. And then that, of course, plants the seed for the other great thing that's so fantastic about living in this country, is that you've got the ability to be able to own land. You have that ability if you're able to, create that type of opportunity for yourself. And so it's a pretty cool way to be able to tie a career into all that too.
And you, like you said, through your life, ended up in a situation where you've been able to form a career and a lifestyle around just land in general, right?
Yeah. So in our company, if you ask, and we always ask this question when we're interviewing people who want to join National Land, the question is, why do you want to be in this business? But if you ask any one of our field team members, they'll tell you it's because I love the outdoors. I mean, that's what makes this, being a land broker or land specialist, so awesome, is that your office is the outdoors. Like, people have offices, but they're rarely in them, or their office is their truck. I mean, that's reality for our team. And so when I was, getting to the age of deciding what I wanted to make a career out of and that sort of thing, I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be stuck on a desk. And so I was like, I don't want to be a doctor or a banker or a lawyer or anything like that. And I want to do something related to the outdoors. And so that eventually got me into where I am today. So I've got a 20+ year career in this. But the irony behind all of it is that now I'm stuck behind a desk in my role now.
Well, I want to rewind really quick. So just listening to the progression of your story, which I think is so cool, is you talked about being young with a victim mindset. And I think that anybody who goes through hardship at a young age does develop this, like, why me? Like, is the question you always ask, like, how did I draw this card? And because, like, I went through that with my own stuff. And I think that anybody who has been through that goes through that stage. But you start out telling this story of how, I was young and I prayed every night to be, to not have what I have, like, to be different. And like, you use the word normal, but it's just to have a different circumstance. And you felt like a victim of circumstance. Fast forward, you're talking about your career and you're thinking, I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to be a lawyer. Like, so not only had you evolved to the point of not feeling like a victim anymore, but actually knowing that you have an opportunity to do anything that you want to do, and then turning down what you don't want and targeting what you do want. Like, that's quite the shift. That's a huge shift in someone's life to be able to target things on that level, or to think about things like that.
Yeah. And I can attribute that to, I developed that frame of mind because, as I mentioned before, the foundation that my family set for me, and then evolving into a new scenario with my mom remarrying and all that kind of stuff. And so, every day along the way, there was different challenges. Eventually, I overcame the physical stuff. I became I competed in showing cutting horses, which, anybody watches Yellowstone, that's a big part of the the narrative. So that I did that, cutting horses, and was pretty successful with that. I played all kinds of sports. Football ended up being my favorite sport, but I played, we didn't have lacrosse back then. Like, that wasn't as crazy as it is now, but I'm sure if we did, I would have figured out a way to play it. But I played baseball and basketball and football and all that kind of fun stuff, soccer. But I didn't figure this out till later, much later. But what I did was I figured out how to be content with my circumstances. And by figuring that out, it allowed me to have a mindset of, I don't have to go down a path that's, somebody thinks that I need to go down. And I didn't have anybody pushing me in any direction. I mean, my parents were always like, be who you want to be. You don't have to be anything. I mean, be you. That was a big thing. I mean, it was like, you be you. So, this concept of being content with your circumstances is something that, as you know, I talk about a lot nowadays, now that I've kind of figured out what that really is. And momentum and movement is a huge part of my life now. And contentment is not settling. It's not accepting, well, this is just the way it's going to be, so I'm going to have to live with it, sort of thing. Contentment is a place where you're acknowledging that this is what you have to deal with, but you have a mindset of, I'm still moving forward. So this certain environment may not be very pleasant. It might suck. I might want to change it, but I'm not going to feel sorry for myself and just wish that it goes away, or I'm not going to give up. I've been through that evolution early on, the feeling sorry for yourself and all that. And so, that was it was formidable for me, and I'd already figured out some accomplishments and figured out that I could be successful at things. And, I ended up being pretty good at building relationships and whatnot. So, I went off to college and decided I was going to figure it out from there. And I'm still figuring it out, for that matter. I mean, but yeah, that was a big thing for me to be able to get to that place.
Yeah, and the role the land played in that is what I kind of found fascinating when you and I were talking originally, because, and I spoke to this a little bit before we started recording, is we spend so much time on this podcast, or all of our communications that we have, pretty much everything we talk about as land brokers, is what can you do to improve the land? Oh, should I put a pond here? Should I build, a food plot here? What's the soil like? What's the pH, so I can know what crops to plant? Like, we're always looking at ways that we can guide and improve the land according to our image of the land. And it's not very often that we stop and think in that whole process how the land shapes us. And just with you talking about it, there's a real true testimony to actual foundational changes that you've experienced. And I thought it was just a really powerful story just on those lines.
Yeah, I'm so glad we did this, because I'd never really thought about it from that perspective either. I mean, as specific as what you just, as eloquently as you just basically said that. I mean, it's just caused me to have so much just flashbacks to the first time I went duck hunting, the first time I broke a clay pigeon, the first time, I harvested my first deer. I mean, the first time I caught a big fish, whether it was, a big trout, or if it was, my first big tuna I caught offshore. How it molded me is, I've said this before, it's the confidence that it gave me of being able to be in a scenario, to try something, to accomplish it and go, okay, I'm not that much different than anybody else. And in fact, I'm going to be the best. That's the attitude that I'm going to take. So I want to outshoot anybody that, I'm going to work to be the best. I want to be the best shot. I want to be the best fisherman. I want to be the most accurate, with a rifle. I want to be the best cutting horse rider, the best on the football field or whatever it may be. And by the way, I'm not the best at any of those things.
The mindset to work for it is the thing.
That's exactly right. And that's, again, the thinking about how the land had a role in all that is that it helped me develop that mindset of I want to be the best. And the best is not arriving at the top of the mountain and going, I did it. And now everybody look at me at how awesome I am, and sitting down and going, okay, I've done it. And that's it. It's the process. The best is about the process, and the attitude that you've got to bring every day, and how you respond to what life throws at you, and picking yourself off the floor those days that you have bad days, because I have bad days. I'm no different than anybody else, and where I go back and tell my friend that I was having that conversation with that said I was lucky because I went through all this stuff. Yeah, it helps for sure, but I still have bad days. I have days where I'm like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with whatever the scenario is anymore. And I think that's a big part of why, I alluded to the fact before that now I'm stuck behind a desk, I came full circle. I still have the opportunity to be outdoors, and thankfully I'm with a company and in a career that I have the opportunity to still do that, not on a daily basis like I did previously, but I also get to fulfill a greater purpose in, being able to work with great people, and, there's folks in our company, whether it be our staff, our support crew, like you and your team, or our field team, our sales team, or the opportunity that I still have clients that still, reach out to me for help, and I'm able to hook them up with, great team members that we've got. That's still a very fulfilling thing. And, it just allows me to continue working towards, the personal mission that I've got. And, it helps me to take another step forward, the purpose that I feel like I have for being on this earth. So it's really cool. The land had a big part in all that.
Well, yeah. And something I wanted to highlight it just myself because I just feel the need to. Like what you've just done here, I think is pretty, I would say different than what a typical company president would do, especially of national land size, is kind of just throw their life story out there for others to learn from. There's an image that a lot of executives project of invulnerability or unflappability in front of people. And for you to be as vulnerable as you just were, and to sort of, because a lot of agents are going to listen to this and sort of let them know what you're all about. And in a sense, just culture is created from the top down in any organization. Who the president is who everybody else will be. And so for you to lay that story out there, it's not very common. So just wanted to express appreciation of that, man. That's a very cool thing for you to do. Yeah.
Well, I didn't wake up this morning planning on doing it exactly that way, but
I kind of put you in the position to do this, and kind of, we kind of put you on the spot here. So
it's important to note, though, and those who know me will appreciate this, is that don't take the vulnerability of me sharing what I just shared as me not wanting to get out there and freaking dominate whatever it is that I've got in front of me, or anybody that's in my way for that matter. So anyway, that being said, it's my honor to be able to share this time with you and talk about this. I mean, again, man, to be able to think about my life and how, the outdoors and the woods and water and land in general have been just a huge part of it. It's why I'm so passionate about what we do here as a company, and then, my small part in it, from a leadership perspective.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's reflected. It's been a very successful company, and it continues to be. And the mindset of exactly what you just said, being vulnerable is not weakness. We still seek out to dominate our industry and be the best that we can be at all times. And there's a constant measuring stick of perfection and improving on top of perfection. So that is always there. So yeah, much thanks to you. Appreciate you rolling with this. I know I kind of like, we put this together at the last second and kind of ideated this before the show. And so I want to express my gratitude for you rolling with this.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I want to add one more thing, just one last note here. The mission of National Land Realty is that we exist to make things grow. And we believe that that's such an important part of the culture of this organization, because in order to serve our clients in the manner that I expect, I want us to be coming in from a standpoint of how can we get better? How can we help people get better? And whether that's, in whatever capacity that may be in, through the services that we provide. Because in the big picture aspect of things, we're either moving forward or moving backwards. There's no middle ground. Like there's no like, you're never not doing something. And I always want to be moving forward. That's incredibly important to me. And it's important for people to understand that you're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. So we have a growth mindset. It's the mission of our organization. It's built around whom we serve. And it's important because in the grand scheme of things, we sell dirt. I mean, there's a lot special with what we do, but I mean, quite simply, we sell dirt. And the cool thing is that there's a lot of good stuff that grows out of dirt. So, our mindset is, in my mind, my personal mindset when it comes to growth is, it's not about aspiring to be the biggest or the best. So I don't wake up every day going, I want to be the biggest land brokerage in the country. Because it's really the meat behind that. It's the process. If I'm showing up every day and living my life in a manner of trying to be my best and aspiring to be the best, whether it's the best, president of a company or the best husband or the best father or the best friend to somebody or best coworker. And my focus is on how do I get better and how do I be the best, because I want to be the best, and understanding it's the process, not necessarily arriving at the mountaintop. That if I focus on the process, then everything else is going to take care of itself. And fortunately, I'm surrounded by a lot of people who share the same type of mentality. I think that's why we've accomplished what we've been able to accomplish. That's why we have a tremendous future ahead of us. But we're going to do it because of our focusing on the best and what that means day in and day out, not simply being able to call ourselves something. So I wanted to share that because that's been a big part of my life. That's how I've been able to accomplish the things that I've accomplished. And hopefully that rubs off on other people as well. And if that's been the case, then I feel like that I'm making the best out of the circumstances that I was given and have figured out a way to be content with, so that ultimately, I'm able to leave a legacy through our company and, whatever else that may be that makes a difference when it's all said and done.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate your time. Absolutely appreciate it.
My pleasure.
This concludes episode number 29 of the National Land Realty podcast, discussing the journey of National Land Realty President Jason Burbage and the way the land has shaped that journey. You can learn more about land ownership and the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com.